The Overtoun Bridge Dog Suicide Scotland 1950 seconds present true story. They say some places inhale sorrow the way stone walls drink in winter rain slowly, silently, until every pore drips with secrets. High in the mist-streaked hills above the River Clyde, there is such a place, Overtoun Bridge. Built in the late 1800s to grace the sweeping driveway of an elegant baronial manor, its grey arches seem almost sculpted from the Scottish gloom itself. Yet beauty alone does not draw the curious traveller here. Instead, it is the unsettling. Tally whispered in village pubs and printed in sober black ink the tally of loyal companions who followed an invisible summons to leap over the parapet and meet the jagged rocks 40 feet below, more than 50 dogs. Always from the same moss-slicked span between the final two parapet stones, always on days when the wind carried no particular scent, at least nothing a human nose could name. No one has ever seen a hand pushing. No one has ever heard a command shouted, and yet generation after generation, the bridge claims its hounds with relentless patience, as though repaying a debt no one living remembers incurring. Locals mutter of a curse cast when the mansion's first mistress died of a broken heart. Others swear they have seen a woman in white drifting along the balustrade, beckoning in silence. Scientists shrug and suggest the tantalizing musk of mink nesting in the underbrush below. But a statistic does not steady a trembling lead, and a rational explanation does not unknot the grief of a child who watched a best friend vanish over cold stone. Tonight you and I will walk that bridge together, 8 steps into history, mystery, and the thin places where one wrong breath can tip the living into legend. 8 chapters, each a lantern held against the Scottish night, tracing rumors and testimonies, digging at roots that burrow deeper than any paw print in mud. Listen closely. The river is waiting, and the wind already carries a faint whine, half breeze, half distant bark asking why. Chapter 1, The First Pawprints. Picture the year 1951. Post-war clouds still hang over Britain, ration books folding, shut one by one, and the Highlands breathe out a cautious sigh of peace. In the hamlet of Milton, few have reason to cross the private estate of Overtoun House except groundskeepers, visiting clergy, and the occasional courting couple who fancy a romantic view. One such afternoon, Shepherd Angus MacLeod tramps the glen with his collie Bracken. Angus is a man of routine. Mend a fence, check the ewes, nod to the manor's butler at a distance. Bracken, however, is a dancer, ears pricked, tail wagging to an unheard reel as Angus tightens a gate hinge. Bracken sniffs along the path and noses onto the bridge for the first time. A gust sweeps the valley. Angus later swears he felt the temperature dip, though the sun still silvered the Clyde far below. He calls once Bracken, heel. But the name flies back to him unanswered. The collie has halted beside the final 2 stones on the west. Parapet, body tense, chest inflating with rapid breaths. From beneath the arch, jackdaws scatter, black punctuation against a pale sky. Bracken's head tilts, as though hearing a whistle perfectly pitched for canine ears alone. Then, without so much as a whine, he launches, paws push off ancient granite. Fur becomes fluttering parchment. Silence becomes a dull, wet full stop. Against the rocks, Angus's scream lodges in laryngitic gravel. By the time he descends the steep embankment, Bracken's eyes already mirror the clouds. The local constable folds a cap between his hands, muttering fox scent, rabbit scent, any. Sent to avoid the one truth printed in the collie's stillness, word spreads. The next spring, a spaniel repeats the plunge. 2 summers later, a retriever. Each owner recounts the same sequence. A sudden alertness, a fixed stare toward the parapet gap, a leap as decisive as a command, dogs that had never hunted mink. Never chased cars, never balked at thunder act in unison with invisible choreography. Village meetings convene in the back rooms of the Run Rig-Inn. Reverend Ian Campbell offers prayers and sprinkles salt at the bridge's midpoint. The local vet, Dr. Morven Wallace, conducts olfactory tests with various animal musks, recording nothing conclusive. Yet the numbers tick upward: 5 dogs, 10, a baker's dozen, until newspapers christen the Spandog suicide bridge. Some nights, Shepherd Angus returns alone, hat in hand, tracing Bracken's final pawprints in dust no breeze dares disturb. He swears the granite hums beneath his palm. He swears he hears nails clicking across stone just ahead of him, always just ahead, leading him toward that fatal opening. It is then, standing between the parapet stones, that Angus senses her, a woman veiled in gauze the color of November. Mist gliding along the balustrade. She carries no lantern, casts no shadow, yet her presence presses the air flat. She knits grief into every heartbeat of the bridge, and Angus, though brave against storms and wolves, cannot meet her hollow gaze. He steps back, heart pounding an arrhythmic reel, and the vision dissolves like breath on frosted glass. From that night onward, Angus keeps a respectful distance. But he cannot silence the rumor he inadvertently births. Overtoun Bridge is haunted not by the howls of doomed hounds, but by the silent song of a lady in white whose sorrow calls to creatures trusting enough to listen. Years pass, families begin shortening leads near the bridge. Children swap dares at school, boasting they will sprint the span while the ghost's back is turned. The manor itself, once a beacon of baronial pride, sits shuttered, inheritance tangled in legal undergrowth as thorny as the brambles around its gardens. Still the dogs come, still they leap, 50 plus and counting, from terriers to mastiffs, each bound as irretrievable as the last breath before sleep. And every time the groundkeeper paints over the red stain on the rocks, rain reveals it anew, rusty hieroglyphs spelling questions no scholar can translate, but folklore seldom rests on a single stone. In Chapter 2 we will unearth forgotten diaries stashed in the attic of Overtoun House, a tangle of ink that may chart the true origin of the bridge's lament. Keep your lantern trimmed, listener. The paper smells of old sorrow, and some passages still bleed. Chapter 2: The Attic of Unfinished Conversations. Dust blooms in little galaxies when the caretaker forces the attic door of Overtoun House for the first time in 30 years. His torch beam crawls over sagging suitcases, a child's rocking horse with one eye gouged out, and portraits stacked like forgotten mirrors. He has come hunting dry rot, yet he feels inexplicably that the rot is watching him. In the farthest corner sits a sea trunk banded in rusted brass. Its lock snaps after a single tap, too eager, almost grateful to surrender. Inside, bundles of letters tied with tartan ribbon, a diary bound in cracked calfskin, and a hand-drawn floor plan of the bridge annotated in hurried feminine script. The caretaker tastes iron on his tongue, fear mingling with the attic's metallic chill. He pockets the diary. Its weight feels like a small, persistent heartbeat. The entries begin December 18996, 6 months after Lady Edith Overtoun miscarried, her only child. Her handwriting is elegant but jagged where grief shook the quill. I walk the bridge nightly. I hear the children I shall never cradle calling from the river mist. They promise rest if I leap, yet something, perhaps providence, perhaps cowardice, roots my feet. On New Year's Eve she sketches a crude dog silhouette beside the parapet gap, captioned "The Watcher." Weeks later she writes of voices, low, distant, so like a mother's lullaby it nails me in place. I sense a presence beside me, four-legged, nosing the air, trembling with a yearning not its own. If I remain, if I keep vigil, maybe it will leap in my stead and the river will be satisfied. The ink smears mid-sentence as though her fingers had jerked away in terror. In the margins, someone else has added a note in blue fountain pen ink, decades fresher. Mink sent theory insufficient. This is psychic transference. The caretaker frowns. Who returned to these pages and why? As he flips onward, Mildew-blotched sheets give way to crisp inserts dated 1957, 1965, 197 to each stapled clipping recounting another dog's plunge. Someone has been curating the catastrophe, feeding the legend like logs into a stove.at sunrise. The caretaker delivers the bundle to Dr. Morven Wallace, now retired, spectacles trembling on arthritic fingers. She reads in silence until tears seep between her wrinkles. I thought we chased superstition when all along we were stalking a lament, she whispers. Her diagnosis is not medical but metaphysical, unresolved maternal grief echoing across stone, seeking warm bodies indiscriminate of species. To test her theory, she enlists Ethan Reed, an animal behavior lecturer from Glasgow. They construct an apparatus of motion-triggered cameras and ultrasonic microphones along the fatal span. 3 cloud-raked nights pass without incident. On the 4th, the wind drops to a hush so total it feels staged. The equipment registers a frequency too low for the human ear, yet strong enough to vibrate the camera housing's 22 Hz, the so-called fear frequency, known to raise gooseflesh and misfire the brain's threat sensors. Moments after the vibration spike, a stray greyhound appears, ribs ridged like broken rafters. It traces an invisible line straight to the parapet gap, posture shifting from wary to urgent devotion as though meeting a long-absent master. Ethan lunges, grabbing the dog's hindquarters. The greyhound howls, twisting with such ferocity that Ethan's palm snakes with blood. Only when Dr. Wallace blows a high-pitched whistle inches from its ear does the trance shatter. The dog collapses, trembling, eyes unfocused, as though waking from a nightmare it cannot recount. Ethan later confesses the sound captured at 22 Hz resolved, when digitally modified, into something eerily canine, a single descending whimper, repeated every 7 seconds, like an SOS from beneath the earth. He plays the file to seasoned handlers. Half leave the room, arms prickling. One mutters, "It's a bereaved call. That dog's already mourning." Meanwhile, rumors swirl that Shepherd Angus MacLeod, now in his 80s, keeps nightly vigil near the bridge holding Bracken's old collar. Passers-by report seeing him speak into the mist, pausing as if an unseen companion answers. When Dr. Wallace visits, Angus hands her a cardboard box of keepsakes. Inside lies a brooch of white enamel, its surface hairline cracked to resemble spiderwebs belonging to Lady Edith. Angus found it wedged between the fatal stones days after Bracken's death, still warm as though freshly unpinned. That night, the river rises with unseasonal rain. Wallace, Ethan, and the caretaker stand mid-span holding the brooch. Cameras whir. The 22 Hz tremor returns stronger, steadier, morphing into a rhythmic pulse that synchronizes with Wallace's fragile heartbeat. She gasps, clutching her chest, yet refuses to leave. In the viewfinder, a shape coalesces. Not quite woman, not quite mist, but the negative space of grief given outline. The cameras crackle. Batteries drop from full to empty in seconds. The shape glides toward the brooch, leans as if listening. All 3 witnesses hear a single soft bark, puppy high, full of impossible hope. Then everything unstitches, wind gusts, lights fail, and the brooch tumbles off the ledge. The figure dissolves like salt. They retrieve the brooch at dawn from the blood-wet rocks. Its enamel has lost all white, stained a gray as deep as the bridge itself. Ethan records no 22 Hz anomalies for weeks afterward. Locals tentatively exhale until a Springer Spaniel named Willow vanishes one April morning. Fishermen find her collar snagged in thornbush halfway down the gorge. The tally climbs to 51. Wallace drafts a letter to the University of Edinburgh's parapsychology unit, concluding, "We face a resonance event, a grief echo tethered to material artifacts and amplified by architecture. Overtoun Bridge is less a structure than a tuning fork humming sorrow to any sentient soul whose heart contains unconditional loyalty." She seals the envelope, but the university will label the case anecdotal and file it away. Yet the townsfolk now watch. The bridge with fresh superstition. Walkers change routes. Tourists pose for photos but keep dogs on double leads. And some nights a pale light drifts the balustrade, the outline of a lady carrying something small against her breast, as if weighing the memory of a child against the promise of release. Those who see her swear she pauses at the gap, looking down with eyes neither living nor cruel, only immeasurably tired. Ethan, Wallace, and the caretaker decide evidence alone will never silence tragedy. They must confront the legend on its own terms, recover the full story of Lady Edith, rediscover what was buried with her miscarried child in the family crypt beneath the chapel grounds, and attempt a rite of reconciliation no textbook dares. Outline: for if they fail, the bridge will keep beckoning, and every leap will echo louder until even human hearts heed the call. Soft decrescendo, step carefully. Next we descend into that crypt, lanterns guttering against a damp laden with centuries of untold lullabies. If stone could sob, this is where you would hear it. Meet me there. Chapter 3 echoes in the crypt. Mid-afternoon clouds smother the sun when Wallace, Ethan, and the caretaker approach the ivy-choked chapel that broods above Overtoun House. Its stained glass windows have long gone opaque with moss, turning holy scenes into green-black silhouettes. Between leaning gravestones, a stone stairwell yawns open, 5 slick steps descending to the family crypt. The air that sighs up feels centuries older than the day, carrying the scented memory of candle wax and sorrow. The caretaker kneels, brushing moss from an iron lock emblazoned with the Overtoun crest, a rearing stag pierced by a single arrow. The key turns too easily, as though the door has grown impatient for company. Hinges shriek and stale darkness folds around them, thick enough to cling to skin. Ethan flicks on a hand torch. The beam reveals walls lined with marble plaques, names and dates half erased by damp, the stones sweating cold tears. Their footsteps drum along a corridor no wider than a coffin lid. Cobweb gossamer shivers in the torchlight beneath their soles. The flagstones feel hollow, resonant, like the body of a drum awaiting the strike that wakes it. Wallace whispers a prayer she learned as a child, words fluttering like a wounded bird against the crypt's stone heart. Ethan activates his recorder, set to monitor frequencies below 20 Hz. The caretaker, ever practical, marks their path with chalk arrows so no one must feel their way out by guesswork. At the far end stands an elevated tomb carved from mottled alabaster. An inscription curls across its face in Gothic script: Lady Edith Rowena Overtoun, beloved wife and eternal mother, 1872 to 1900. Directly beside it, smaller, plainer, rests a child-sized sarcophagus, unnamed save for a single chiseled word: joy. The implication hits harder than any eulogy. Life that never breathed, still christened with hope. Wallace wipes a film of soot from the lid of the infant coffin. Her fingertips return smudged black, as though the stone itself were weeping ash. Ethan's recorder flickers a low, tremulous register pulsing every 7 seconds, kin to the bridge's fear frequency, yet laced with something new, a faint echo of lullaby notes. Warped as if played underwater, driven by equal parts resolve and dread, they unseal the infant sarcophagus. The lid glides aside with unnatural ease, exhaling a breath of air colder than the crypt itself. Inside lies no tiny skeleton, no relic. Wrapped in baptismal silk, only a neatly folded letter sealed with discolored wax and a small silver rattle tarnished nearly black. Wallace's hands tremble as she retrieves the note. By torchlight she reads: "To whichever soul finds this, forgive the absence. My daughter rests where river meets sky, her ashes scattered that her spirit might roam free, yet freedom breeds longing. If she calls, it is for a heartbeat the womb could not grant, Let no creature answer her cry, for the river hungers to cradle what the earth denied. The signature is unmistakable, Edith Rowena Overtoun, a gust with no earthly source. Stirs Wallace's skirt. The silver rattle jingles once, though no hand shakes it. Ethan's recorder peaks 22 Hz, then 21, dipping lower, forming a dirge that vibrates marrow. The caretaker swears the marble walls ripple like pond water touched by wind. From somewhere deeper than sound, they all sense. A dog's whimper, lonely, determined, heartbreakingly young. The caretaker falters, knees buckling. He sees Bracken's familiar silhouettes link between tombs, tail low, ears pinned drawn forward by an unseen leash. He calls the collie's name, voice cracking, but the figure melts into darkness. Wallace grips his shoulder, reminding him of the chalk arrows, of the living who still need him. She presses the silver rattle into Ethan's palm. Evidence, she murmurs, though both know it is more an anchor by which they might steady a foundering soul. Condensation drips from the vaulted ceiling in slow, deliberate beats, as though the crypt itself counts time lost. Wallace reseals the infant coffin, tracing the word joy with a fingertip. Your mother loved you, she whispers into the stone. Your rest should not cost others theirs. The recorder's low hum subsides, settling into silence so pure it rings in their ears. They retreat, torchlight wobbling across the corridor. At the threshold, Wallace turns once more. In the gloom, she thinks she sees the faint outline of a woman, cradling nothing in her arms, eyes luminous and pleading. A blink, and the vision is gone, yet a warmth lingers, like a candle newly snuffed, back in open air. Evening rain begins to fall, filling the stairwell with the scent of wet earth and cleansing. Ethan pockets the silver rattle. We have two. Return it, he says, unsure whether he means to the river or the bridge. Wallace nods, gaze locked on the gathering mist curling along the treetops. First, she answers, we must learn how to say goodbye in a language grief can hear. Overhead, thunder growls a dog's growl. Some might say, others just storm-throated sky. Regardless, the bridge stands waiting, stone arches stretched like the ribs of a behemoth too stubborn to die, and in that hollow stretching toward night. Wallace realizes the next step is not science but right, an act of confession and release where river, bridge, and mourning mother might finally unbraid their fates. Chapter 4, where the river remembers. Rain knits the highlands into one dark garment as Wallace, Ethan, and the caretaker cross the threshold of night. They have chosen the hour just before midnight when the Clyde lies black as an unblinking eye to attempt what Wallace calls a rite of disjunction, a severing of grief from granite. She carries the silver rattle in a velvet pouch. Ethan cradles the diary and a bundle of white heather meant as an offering. The caretaker shoulders a lantern fueled by whale oil, the kind whose stink once kept watchmen awake on castle ramparts. They reach the gorge floor first, scrambling down a goat trail that snakes beneath Overtoun Bridge. From below, the arches loom like ribs of a slumbering leviathan, stone slick with centuries of mist. The river mutters around rocks, syllables smooth as glass yet edged with undertow. Wallace kneels at the water's brink, arranging 6 river stones in a circle, a crude compass meant to anchor the standing participants north, south, east, west, heaven and waiting earth. Her voice shakes as she explains the ritual. They will read Lady Edith's final letter aloud, then lower the rattle into the current, symbolically returning the promise of cradle song to the child for whom it was forged. Grief must complete its arc, she says. If her lullaby keeps echoing, perhaps it is because she never finished singing it. Ethan doubts any incantation can excise sorrow carved into Scottish bedrock, yet he keeps his misgivings behind. Pursed lips, the caretaker merely nods, a man prepared to hammer nails into any coffin hope provides. Wallace begins to read. Each word rises like incense, twisting in torch glow before mingling with drizzle. She speaks of a mother's empty arms, of nights spent pacing the bridge while milk soured in breasts that would never feed. She admits bargaining, offering a leap of her own in exchange for one moment of her child's breath. She confesses the terror that held her back. If God does not catch me, who will rock her in the far beyond? Mid-sentence, the lantern flares, puffing soot. Wind slashes up river with the smell of peat and ozone. Ethan's recorder hisses 22 Hz again, a sine wave beneath conscious sound that makes bowels tremor. He steadies himself just as the caretaker's dogged stoicism falters. From the embankment above comes the rapid click of claws on stone, a dog's claws, pacing the bridge in restless circles. They cannot see the animal, yet its presence thunders. In their pulses, Wallace's voice wavers, but she perseveres, reading to the last line, where Edith implores, "Do not let kindness answer my call. Turn away all who love unconditionally, for love unstops the river's hunger." With that, Wallace rises, producing the silver rattle. It glints once moonlight shears across tarnished bells, and then she lowers it on a silk cord into the Clyde. Cold water swallows her wrist up to the vein. Nothing happens at first. Rain pats the surface, fracturing torch reflections. The caretaker mouths a half-remembered psalm. Ethan rechecks the recorder. The frequency has dropped to 19 Hz, then 18, a pitch felt in teeth more than ears. The claws overhead halt. Silence holds its breath. Then a lullaby floats over the gorge, a woman's hum, off-key with century-old sorrow. The sound is everywhere and nowhere, threading between leaves, echoing against bridgestone, vibrating the river until ripples dance around the submerged rattle. Wallace's eyes flood. She knows the melody, a Scottish cradle song her grandmother once sang about sheep counted into slumber. The hum stretches, straining, until it fractures into a cry that is part infant, part canine, wholly bereft. The water surges. A whirlpool no wider than a cradle forms around the rattle, tugging at the silk cord. Wallace grips it, refusing to let go. A pale radiance blooms beneath the surface shape of a woman stooping, arms outstretched not to snatch but to cradle the bell toy in the hand that offers it. Wallace feels warmth lance up her arm, a fever pulse that dissolves chill marrow. She hears a heartbeat against her palm, tiny, rapid, unmistakably alive. Above, on the bridge, a dog barks once, bright with playfulness. The bark morphs into 2, then 3, as if joined by litter mates. Ethan darts upslope to the arches, skidding on wet turf. At the parapet gap stands a brindled terrier, hackles flat, tail wagging in ecstatic circles. Beside it, flickering like candle fire in wind, is the translucent outline of a collie bracken head lowered in recognition. The terrier's owner, unseen, must have dropped the leash. Yet the dog does not leap. Instead it steps back, nose twitching as though sniffing. An invisible hand, Ethan calls Wallace's name. She cannot answer. The river's glow binds her attention. The rattle tugs once more, and this time she lets the silk cord slip. The bells dip, jingle a lullaby's final cadence, then vanish into black water. The pale figure smiles an expression almost imperceptibly tragic, the joy of farewell, and dissolves like light extinguished between blinks. Instantly, the Hertz reading dies to 0. Rain softens, the terrier above shakes its fur and trots to Ethan, no longer fascinated by the parapet. Bracken's spectre gives one companionable thump of tail in air, then follows the ghostly woman into nothing. Ethan watches until even imagination admits defeat. Back on the riverbank, Wallace is sobbing not despairing tears, but exhausted release. The caretaker kneels beside her, palms spread on cold mud, listening. No dog whines, no hidden frequency stirs stone. Only the ordinary hush of night and the lingering scent of silver on Wallace's fingers testify that anything transpired at all. They climb toward the manse in silence, the terrier padding ahead as if guiding them home. At the bridge, Wallace pauses. Waterlogged moonlight shows no figure drifting its balustrade. The gap between stones looks merely like missing masonry, nothing more. And yet, with senses born from months of dread, all three feel a hush settling over Overtoun, like the moment after a mother's final note when the child's breathing evens and the lullaby is at last complete. Still, grief seldom ends in one ritual. Trauma leaves after images, echoes that fade by increments. They resolve to keep watch. If no dog leaps in the coming months, they will know the river's hunger has been sated. If it does, they will search again deeper into myth, ready to bargain once more with tears and relics. For now they turn toward the manor lights flickering like embers of a storm-soaked hearth, believing for the first time that dawn might rise without claws clicking on cold stone. And somewhere downstream, the silver rattle spins in quiet currents, a lullaby feathered into water, cradled not by ghosts or granite, but by the river that has finally learned to rock gently. Chapter 5. The silence that followed morning breaks like a slow-turning lens, bringing first gray, then pale rose, then the humid gold of a Scottish summer that feels almost borrowed from another country. 3 weeks have slipped past the midnight rite, and in that time the valley has worn a hush so profound that locals remark on it in whispers, as though loud conversation might crack the spell. No dog has jumped, not a collie from Milton, not a tourist spaniel, not even the mongrel strays that used to loiter under hedges scavenging picnic scraps. The newspaper in Dumbarton runs a tiny column, "Bridge curse broken. Skeptics cautious." The headline feels both triumphant and oddly premature, like congratulating a patient for surviving surgery before the stitches dissolve. Wallace spends the first week charting everything that doesn't happen. She notes each walk across the span, each dog that trots nose down along the parapet but chooses to return to its owner's side. Her notebook fills with negative data, empty cells where tragedies would have gone. The absence is strangely heavy, a ledger of things spared. Ethan installs new sensors anyway, because science trusts only numbers. Day after day, the devices register nothing below 20 Hz, no phantom lullabies, no subsonic dread. Batteries hold their charge. Even the air seems lighter, as though the bridge has paused mid-breath and decided exhaling grief is finally an option. The caretaker keeps vigil, lantern unlit now, mere habit guiding him to the arch at dusk. He carries no collar, only a folded scrap of tartan ribbon he found pressed between the diary pages. If he hears a distant bark, he simply smiles, because the sound belongs on earth, not in the half-imagined places between stone and mist. Yet peace, like nettles, seldom grows without the prickle of doubt. Each quiet sunrise stirs new rumors, that the lullaby will resume with the next full moon, that the river has traded dogs for something dearer, that grief this old merely gathers strength for a final catastrophic note. Mid-July brings a visitor whose presence feels like wind in a sealed room. Her name is Rosalind Dempsey, investigative journalist for a Glasgow podcast that feeds on unsolved legends and paranormal cold cases. She arrives armed with twin weapons. Skepticism sharp as scalpel steel and a portable recorder always blinking red. Rosalind has interviewed exorcists who charged by the hour, mediums who wept on cue, and physicists who swore quantum anomalies explain everything from view to Loch Ness sightings. She leans on the manor's bell pull one bright afternoon, notebook fanned like a deck of cards, ready to play reality against folklore and rake in whatever truth falls between. Wallace greets her warily, remembering how quickly curiosity can turn sacred wounds into spectacle. Still, transparency feels like duty. She walks Rosalind to the bridge, recounts every plunge, every failed theory, every decibel of subsonic fear. She omits only the softest details, the warmth that traveled up her arm, the smile that wasn't quite sorrow or relief because such delicacies shatter under inquiry. Rosalind listens, brows knit, occasionally lifting the recorder to capture birdsong, footfalls, even Wallace's pause for breath. Silence is data, she explains, scribbling a note. In hauntings, silence is often the loudest thing. They descend to the gorge where slate-gray boulders crouch like sleeping giants. Wallace points to the spot where the rattle vanished. Rosalind photographs river currents curling over hidden stones. Any diver look for the relic? She asks Ethan. Answers from the slope above. We agreed to let the river keep it. Disturbing it felt. Irresponsible. Rosalind arches a brow. Fascinating, faith framed as conservation. She sketches a question mark beside the word irresponsible. That evening Rosalind dines with them in the caretaker's cottage. Rain freckles the windows, gentle but persistent, as though clouds can't help checking in. Over stew thick with barley, she presses on the soft spots of their narrative. Why did only dogs respond? Could low-frequency vibration alone explain coordinated leaps? What if local hunting scents changed after the ritual-altering olfactory triggers? Ethan replies with charts. Wallace replies with parables, the caretaker. Mostly refills bowls, muttering that answers seldom arrive before patience runs out. Just before midnight, Rosalind asks to walk the bridge alone with her recorder, nothing more. Wallace hesitates but nods. Boundaries must stretch or they choke. In drizzle-damp air, Rosalind strides the span, heels tapping slow Morse code into stone. She stops at the fatal gap, leans over the balustrade, and whispers, "If you're there, make yourself known." Her words exit like breath racing to be fog. The recorder captures only rainfall pattering granite. She tries again, voice softer, "Tell me your story." Nothing replies but the river, endless in its rehearsal of forgetting. Back in the cottage she plays the tape. Static drizzle, her own heartbeat burring the microphone. Then, faintly, a note. Perhaps a chord of damp wind under the arch twinning. With distant traffic, Rosalind replays it 10 times, slows it, filters frequencies. Every iteration sounds more like something than the last first breeze, then bed springs, then maybe the scrape of nail on wood. She glances up, eyes bright, ambiguous. Gold, she whispers, meaning audio that believers will hail and skeptics dismiss. Ethan shrugs. Wallace watches the rain. Daylight returns carrying tourists. News of the lull the dogless fortnight has lured travelers eager to photograph the bridge that cured itself. Car parks fill with camper vans, leashes crisscross. Like festive bunting, dogs sniff, tails whirring, unaware of how many ghost stories ride their backs like invisible riders. Rosalind interviews visitors, capturing hope, cynicism, and the fruity bark of a dachshund unimpressed by cursed architecture. Through headphones she monitors background noise, hunting for hidden harmonies. She finds none. Until twilight, a Saturday. Dusk, the color of bruised heather, settles in. Rosalind packs her gear, but a Stata Bernard named Fergus refuses to board its owner's SUV. It sits on the bridge, hackles flat, ears pricked, listening. Wallace notices first. The dog's gaze pins the gap, not frantic, not terrified, but curious, as though hearing the faintest ringing of a dinner bell. Its owner tugs the lead. Fergus resists. Rosalind's recorder, swung loose at her hip, shows a flicker on the decibel graph. Ethan sprints to sensors. Still no subsonic hum, no glitching batteries. Yet Fergus's breath quickens, dewlap quivering. With something unarticulated, for a heartbeat, Wallace tastes iron again, sharp as attic dust. She steps forward, voice calm. "Good boy, Fergus, come away." The dog turns, ears swiveling, and in that instant everyone hears it, an almost inaudible chime, like a rattle underwater struck once by current. Fergus whines, padding toward the parapet. Rosalind raises her boom mic, lips parted. Wallace reaches out, palm guiding dog and leash towards safety. The chime sounds again, softer, receding. Fergus exhales, shoulders slackening as though a spell loosens. He follows Wallace without complaint, climbing into the SUV with a huff that might be relief. Night deepens, but unease lingers. The caretaker lights his lantern for the first time in weeks. Ethan recalibrates sensors, baffled by silent logs. Rosalind sits beneath a birch, headphones sealed, looping the moment of the faint chime. In some replays it disappears entirely, as if shy. In others it rings undeniably, a child's toy captured for one impossible breath. The pattern baffles. Audio software. Algorithms label it a known artifact. Later, by the dying fireplace, the four convene. Rosalind's skepticism has softened like wax near flame. If residual energy exists, she says carefully, maybe it's fracturing, not gone. Like aftershocks, Wallace nods. Echoes fade, but they bounce off surfaces. Some corners save them up. Ethan theorizes about architectural nodes, the bridge acting as resonator while the riverbed conducts acoustic memory. None of it feels conclusive. All of it feels uncomfortably alive. They agree to a new plan, map the entire estate, with geophanes and infrasound recorders, not just the bridge. If the lullaby persists in pockets, they will find the pockets. Meanwhile, Wallace drafts a plea to local councils, limit canine access until one full season passes without incident. Bureaucracy will muddle the request, but she must try. The caretaker returns to nightly lantern rounds, ribbon tucked safe in his breast pocket. Rosalind pitches a tent on the manor lawn, vowing to capture every whisper the land exhales. 2 more weeks stumble by. No dog leaps. Sensors pick up small hertz ripples, never repeating intervals, like fragments of a song someone keeps forgetting how to sing. Rosalind compares them to the Clyde's flow rates, to wind shear, to engine noise from distant motorways. Correlations are inconsistent, maddening. She begins reading Lady Edith's diary out loud in empty hallways, curious whether words might provoke response. The manor stays mute, but once Rosalind swears she feels a child's hand brush hers cool. Brief, undeniably present. She deletes the voice memo she was recording, unsure fear should be archived. As August edges nearer, a new tension climbs the hills. The anniversary of Lady Edith's death looms, 125 years since she miscarried and began pacing. Overtoun Bridge. Wallace fears rituals behave like tides pulled by dates and memories as moons pull water. They plan a vigil for that night, a watch and wait beneath the arches with enough equipment to wire a small concert hall. Rosalind prepares a live podcast broadcast. Ethan double-checks cables. The caretaker oils his lantern glass until it shines. Like a captive star, on the eve of the vigil, a thunderstorm rolls through, scouring the sky with blue-white whips. Lightning backlights the bridge, turning each arch into a monstrous jaw. The gorge floods, river surging high enough to froth against mossy stones where dogs used to land. Yet even in the torrent no howl rises, no spectral lullaby threads the gale. Wallace stands at her window, watching sheets of rain blur the parapet. She dares to hope this storm is the river's final word, an emphatic cleansing roar, washing away centuries of grief. But hope is fragile in haunted country, and storms sometimes unearth rather than erase. Beneath the roaring river, something knocks once against the sensor housings, a hollow clink, metallic, unmistakable. Ethan checks the live feed. The signal spike sketches the exact profile of a rattle's jingle bell. Somewhere in the flood-swollen dark, the silver toy has come home. Chapter 6, A Night Wired for Ghosts. The storm spends itself just after 2 a.m, leaving the estate drenched and glittering, every leaf a trembling mirror for the moon. In its wake the Clyde runs high and wild, brown with uprooted peat, sweeping tree limbs and fence posts downstream. Yet amid the debris something glints beneath the downstream sensor tripod, the silver rattle lodged between roots like a message. In a crooked post box, Ethan, wading in icy water up to his thighs, retrieves it with trembling fingers. Though submerged for weeks, the toy is spotless, its tarnish washed clean, bells shining as if newly forged. He half expects the metal to burn, but it lies against his palm at body temperature, as though containing a tiny, sleeping heart. By sunrise, the estate resembles a command center. Cables snake across grass still steaming under first light, connecting geophonies, parabolic mix, thermal cameras, and infrasound arrays. Rosalind's podcast rig occupies the manor's old conservatory. Panes fogging with equipment heat. She has titled the special bridge of 100 whispers, planning to stream whatever the vigil captures. Listeners have already begun sending questions, hoping for EVPs, apparitions, a definitive sentence from the other side. Wallace feels queasy. The dead, she thinks, should never be expected to perform on cue, yet perhaps exposure is protection. Many eyes, many witnesses, fewer opportunities for darkness to isolate its prey. They set the vigil for Edith's death night, August 1st. As dusk folds itself along the ridges, a hush settles heavier than any thunderhead. The caretaker lights 3 lanterns, one on the bridge, one halfway down the goat trail, and one in the gorge beside fresh stacked equipment cases. The glow outlines the arches in ember, like vertebrae beneath translucent skin. Above, clouds herd and reform, unwilling to decide on rain. Rosalind begins broadcasting precisely at 9. Her voice is steady, carrying that journalist's mixture of cool detachment and electric curiosity. She sketches the history for listeners. 51 canine deaths, an unbreakable pattern broken only weeks ago, the ritual that might have ended it, and the silver relic now back from the deep. As she speaks, Wallace wraps the rattle in linen and places it on a small wooden catafalque set in the bridge center. Beside it she lays a sprig of white heather, one last gift from the hills. The caretaker murmurs the Lord's Prayer, not as exorcism but as lullaby, gentle and slow. 10 o'clock. Sensors show nothing but wind. 11. An owl hoots from cedars near the manor roof. Mice skitter. Equipment hums. Midnight slides in on silent souls. The air thickens, damp but windless, each breath tasting faintly metallic as though the storm. Lefton's still swirling. Ethan notices the first anomaly on his tablet, a tremor at 23 Hz, slight, repeating every 7 seconds. He looks up. Rosalind sees his eyes widen and kills her mic, mouthing, "We're live." Wallace nods, signaling continue. The broadcast carries on. Truth has never asked for comfortable timing. 23 Hz dips to 22, then to the dread weighted 21. With each drop the air temperature plummets. Wallace's breath becomes smoke. She grips the bridge rail. Moisture beads on the stone in perfectly round droplets that refuse to roll, as if gravity forgets them. From the equipment at her feet a tiny bell sounds once, twice. She whirls. The linen bundle trembles on its stand, bells chiming without. Visible touch. Ethan's headset crackles with a new signal, a faint rhythmic hiss like fabric dragged across wicker. He patches the channel to Rosalind's board. The audience hears it too, a communal chill racing through headphones around the world. The caretaker steps forward, lantern raised. Light halos the linen, revealing a darker stain spreading outward water. Or perhaps something thicker, seeping up from the toy. Wallace reaches to steady it. The instant her fingers brush cloth, she hears a woman's sigh at her ear, tender and exhausted, the sound of someone finally sitting down after carrying grief too far. On the slope above, a German shepherd named Elsa, tourists camping illegally in the woods, breaks loose from a tent flap. She charges onto the bridge, claws clattering like thrown dice. Her owners sprint behind but skid to a halt. The air before the gap ripples, a mirage of heat on cool stone. Elsa freezes one paw step from the parapet, head cocked, she winds tail. Wagging not in fear but greeting, Wallace sees it too, the shimmer coalescing into a woman kneeling, arms extended in invitation, face softly luminous. In the cradle of those arms, a smaller glow flickers, infant shape, undefined yet unmistakably present. The apparition hums the cradle song, notes clear as glass chimes. Sensors spike, 19 Hz, 1817, descending like a pressure gauge. Bleeding, the bridge vibrates, dust drifts from mortar. Ethan shouts above the resonance, ground coupling off the scale. But his words scuttle away, meaningless. Rosalind keeps her mic open, tears streaking cheeks she does not feel. Listeners worldwide hear the lullaby now. No special equipment needed, a melody older than radio, threaded with longing refined by a century of absence. Some will claim later it matched a Gaelic hymn for stillborn children. Others will insist it was only wind coaxing fissures in sandstone. Yet in that moment doubt folds its wings. Wallace steps between Elsa and the apparition. She holds out the linen bundle. The bells inside jingle, matching the sung cadence beat for beat. The ghost lifts her gaze, a geyser of sorrow and gratitude compressed into two fathomless eyes. She does not rise. Instead, her form begins to unravel, strands of pale light peeling away like smoke in reverse, swirling toward the bundle. Infant glow merges first, then mother, braiding into funnels of silver that pour into the rattle's metal shell. The bells ring one final chord, sustained harmonically perfect, before the linen stills. Silence lands like down feathers. Sensor graphs flatline. The cold relents by degrees. Elsa shakes water from her coat and trots to her owners, as unconcerned as if waking from a nap. Wallace lowers the wrapped bundle, pulse hammering. The caretaker croaks, "Did we just?" But cannot finish. No one can. Rosalind remembers the audience and flips her mic. Even she, word forged and deadline tempered, stumbles. Listeners, we believe. We may have witnessed the disintegration of what some labeled a haunting, others a residual trauma. I don't have language, so I'll let the quiet speak. She fades the gain, leaving broadcast ears full of cricket hush and gentle river. They convene in the conservatory as stars dull into false dawn. The rattle rests at the center of a slate table. Wallace unwraps it. The silver now gleams almost white, bells sealed with fine seams of solder, no longer hollow. She lifts it. The toy is heavy, weighted, as if filled with liquid silver or sleep. She tries to shake it. No sound emerges. The bells are silent, their work complete. Ethan proposes sealing it in the manor chapel, placing it near Edith's empty coffin. The caretaker disagrees. She asked us not to answer her call, he reminds. We must not hoard what she has reclaimed. Rosalind suggests the river again. Water, she argues, is memory and forgetfulness together. Wallace studies the motionless toy and decides on a third option. Bury it on the estate grounds under a young silver birch, living wood to guard resting metal. Living roots, living soil life to cradle what once graved it. They dig the grave at sunrise, dew pearls on grass, and the terrier from earlier sits watch, tail thumping. Wallace lowers the silent rattle, covers it with earth, and plants the birch sapling, pressing soil like tucking blankets. The caretaker tis the tartan ribbon around the slender trunk. Ethan sets a single stone river smoothed, heart-shaped at the base. Rosalind records only one sentence. Here a lullaby lies down. days slip by like feathers on current. Not one dog approaches the parapet gap with more than mild interest. Sensors remain flat, no subsonic growl, no spectral chime. Tourists dwindle, lured by fresher legends elsewhere. Rosalind releases her episode. Response ranges from awe to derision, but even skeptics admit the immersive silence in the final minutes unnerved them. Donations pour into a new fund to install safety. Fencing not out of fear now, but in quiet commemoration. On the third week, Wallace walks the bridge alone at dusk. Swallows stitch the sky. Heather perfumes the breeze. She stops at the gap and listens. Behind the silence she senses not absence but sleep, deep and complete. A smile ghosts her lips, fragile as gossamer, and for the first time she notices how beautiful the view is, river coiling through valley like silver ribbon. She touches the parapet, not to test danger but to share a moment of peace with ancient stone that has finally relinquished its sorrow. The caretaker, watching from the manse, steps, lifts his unlit lantern in salute. Ethan joins him, coffee steaming, plans for dismantling the rig already forming. Rosalind stands farther off, phone forgotten, simply breathing the quiet. None of them speak. The bridge has said enough for one lifetime, yet legends seldom conclude. They merely go dormant, waiting for ears tuned to older frequencies. In 2 chapters' time we will learn what becomes of a community once its darkest song fades, how emptiness can echo almost as loudly as grief, and how fragile humans stay when certainty slips. But for tonight, Overtoun Bridge is only a bridge, arches humming with nothing more supernatural than summer wind. Chapter 7, The Weight of an Untold Silence. The hush that settled over Overtoun Bridge might have passed for ordinary countryside quiet to anyone arriving fresh to the valley. Birds still quarreled at dawn, tractors still rattled along. The Milton Road, the Clyde still murmured its relentless syllables against stone. Yet for those who had lived beneath the bridge's shadow, the stillness felt charged like air inside a cathedral long after the organ stops. It carried an almost tactile gravity, as though every molecule of atmosphere remembered the lullaby and held itself respectfully in its wake. Weeks spiraled into early September, and life resumed its regular seams. School children tramped the lane in uniform sweaters, shepherds whistled collies through damp heather, and tourists turned their attention to autumn festivals farther north. The bridge, once the valley's dark heartbeat, became again what the architect intended, a picturesque threshold of gray arches framing cloud-stitched skies. Yet peace, when it arrives suddenly, can ring louder than calamity, and for some the new equilibrium felt precarious, a soap bubble moment away from pop. Rosalind returned to Glasgow to cut her podcast series into a 3-part narrative titled The Bridge That Learned to Sleep. She layered the final silent minutes with gentle audio of the Clyde's current, inviting listeners to lean in and discover that absence could be as dramatic as presence. Downloads soared, sponsors clamored, and Rosalind's inbox swelled with letters from grieving pet owners who found comfort in the idea that unresolved love might finally rest. She answered each message personally, but late at night she played the raw recording again, headphones pressed tight, hoping to catch the faintest resurgence of bells. She never did, and the lack itself became a lullaby. Ethan dismantled most of the sensor array, returning gear to university shelves labeled field use only. He filed a paper on infrasound anomalies and architectural resonance, a draft dense with graphs but modest in claim. He included no mention of ghosts, only non-classical acoustic events resolved through community-led ritual peer reviewers. Scratched at the phrasing, yet one commended his clarity in describing uncertainty. Science, after all, thrives on the honest admission of what it cannot prove. Ethan felt oddly light as he boxed away the last data drive light, yet haunted by the thought that he might never again witness something that so eloquently outstripped explanation. The caretaker Douglas Grieg, his full name rarely spoken, found himself at evening loose ends. For decades his routine had orbited the bridge, lantern rounds, salt scatterings, silent prayers for lives not yet lost. Now, with danger lifted, he discovered how much of his own story had been written in reaction to an invisible adversary. Some nights he walked the parapet anyway, letting the memory of vigilance fade by increments, like a muscle unlearning tension. Where once he felt the bridge hum beneath his boots, he now sensed only the faint vibration of passing cars, a mundane tremor reassuring in its ordinariness. Dr. Morven Wallace, meanwhile, confronted an unexpected hollowness, her life's latter. Chapter had twined so tightly with the haunting the diary, the frequencies, the ritual that its resolution left her adrift, a character whose raison d'etre had closed like a finished book. She channeled restlessness into small acts, tending the young birch where the rattle lay buried, volunteering at the village clinic, writing long letters to academic journals that never quite expressed the miracle she had seen. She tried to shape the tale as science, then as folklore, then as personal testimony, but each attempt felt like describing color to someone born without sight. Eventually she decided the truest record was the sapling itself, roots drinking rain where sorrow once spooled, yet not everyone welcomed the silence. In local pubs, old men who had traded stories of spectral dogs for decades now found conversational cupboards bare. Conspiracy forums online mourned the loss of a reliable mystery, spinning theories that the government had staged the haunting to test sonic weapons, that the villagers were complicit in mass hypnosis, that the lullaby was a marketing stunt for Rosalind's podcast. The valley, it seemed, was addicted to its own tragedy, and detox stirred withdrawal tremors in minds seeking drama. On a crisp equinox afternoon, a letter arrived addressed to Dar Wallace, inked in neat, looping script. It bore the crest of the Overtoun family, an emblem she had not seen since tracing Edith's name in the crypt. The letter came from Laird Alexander Overtoun, descendant of the childless branch that had sold the manor to a trust decades earlier. He expressed gratitude for safeguarding the estate's legacy and requested a meeting to discuss future stewardship. There was talk of converting the manse into a heritage center, a place where visitors could learn the bridge's full story curse, cure, and caution in a setting of respectful remembrance. Wallace felt a twinge of unease. Museums can both preserve and petrify living memory. Yet stewardship, she reasoned, was better than neglect. The meeting convened beneath the birch. Laird Overtoun, a tall man with scholar's spectacles and gardener's fingernails, knelt to inspect the ribbon on the sapling and nodded as though reading a vital sign. He spoke softly, describing family archives, hinting that Edith's grief had long shadowed the house, reports of servants hearing lullabies in corridors, dogs frightened of the nursery wing, letters lost to fire. Sorrow becomes architecture, he mused, palming the young trunk. Perhaps joy can too, if we let it. He proposed funding a scholarship in veterinary behavioral science, named for Bracken. Ethan, present by invitation, accepted the idea with a smile that reached deeper than academic pride. During the meeting, a golden retriever trotted up the path, unleashed, tail swaying like wheat. It belonged to hikers picnicking near the old walled garden. The dog paused at the birch, sniffed the soil, and sat calmly beside the caretaker's boots, gaze soft and content. No tension vibrated in its muscles, no invisible whistle turned its ears. The hikers called. The retriever rose and bounded away, fern fronds parting in its wake. Wallace felt a knot inside her chest loosen another notch. That night, under a harvest moon fat and low, Douglas Grieg performed what he hoped would be his final lantern walk. The bridge glowed silver, and in the river's ragged mirror he saw himself as a younger man, shoulders squared against unseen storms. He realized he had grown old in service to a grief not his own. With a small bow to the parapet, he snuffed the flame, letting moonlight guide him back to the cottage. He slept dreamlessly for the first time since Bracken's fall. Elsewhere in Scotland, far from the valley, Fergus's owners sent Wallace a postcard. The big street Bernard sprawled on a beach, paws splayed in seafoam, captioned, "Learning that water can be kind." She pinned it above her desk beside a printed spectrogram of the last lullaby note. Side by side, they looked like proof that the universe could hold both anguish and balm, stitched edge to edge without seam. In October, blue cold mornings arrived. Rosalind invited Wallace and Ethan to Glasgow for a live audience recording. The theatre sold out. People queued in scarves and fingerless gloves, clutching dog-eared diaries, collars, plush toys, artifacts of personal grief, hoping for echo or closure. On stage, under soft amber lights, Rosalind played the original field recordings, the 19 Hertz. Thrum, the bell chime, the yawning silence after. The audience hushed, some wept. Then Wallace spoke, not of hauntings, but of love's persistence, of the way loyalty can tether spirit to stone, of the complicated grace found in letting go. Ethan followed with slides of genomes swirling with noise-colored data, confessing. He still did not understand what happened, but would spend his life honoring the mystery's gift, humility. During Q&A, a teenager asked whether the valley felt different now, whether birds sang brighter, whether the river changed its course. Wallace answered that places, like people, bear invisible scars. Healing does not erase the mark, but transforms its meaning. The bridge remained the same length, the river the same breadth, yet stepping onto the span now felt like walking into a story that had found its punctuation. She invited anyone visiting to tread softly, to listen, not for ghosts, but for their own heartbeat, learning new rhythms. As winter's first frost whitened the hills, construction crews arrived to install discreet safety railings along the parapet. The design echoed the original stone balustrade, respectful rather than intrusive. Local papers photographed the ceremony. The laird cut a ribbon, a school choir sang a Gaelic blessing, and villagers released white balloons that drifted over. The Clyde, like fledgling spirits, finally granted sky. No sensor recorded subsonic frequencies. The only hum was children's laughter bouncing off arches older than their grandparents. Late that evening, Wallace, Ethan, Rosalind, and Douglas gathered one last time at the birch. The caretaker poured ram of single malt onto the roots, a toast to the unseen. They clinked tin mugs, breathed misty rings, and watched breath dissolve. The sapling's leaves, tipped gold, whispered overhead. When a breeze rattled branches, it sounded almost like bells, but not quite. The difference made all the difference. This was the living rustle of wood and wind, life greeting life, no sorrow woven into its fibers. Rosalind asked if they thought the valley would keep its peace. Ethan shrugged philosophically. Wallace replied that grief, like weather, never truly ends. It circulates, condenses, rains, and evaporates again. But now the valley possessed new climate, a system tempered by witness, ritual, and time, if darkness sought entry. It would meet roots knotted in fertile ground, branches ready to lift light skyward. They parted at the lane, headlights cutting cones through drifting mist. One by one the cars turned corners, leaving only the caretaker shuffling home. He paused on his step to look back. The bridge was invisible in night gloom, yet he sensed it standing easy for the first time, arches breathing like ribs of a creature. Fallen into gentle sleep, he murmured good night, not expecting any reply and receiving none, a silence that felt neither empty nor ominous, but like a page turned to a new chapter whose first word waited for dawn. Chapter 8, Footsteps Beyond. The echo, winter rinsed the valley in pearl-gray quiet, knitting frost across every fen and field. Where once grief had simmered, only the ordinary poetry of seasons now prevailed. The brittle snap of ice under boots, the distant bleat of ewes heavy with lamb, the cloaked hush of snowfall powdering the manor's eaves by January's midpoint. The young silver birch wore crystal filigree. each twig glassy with rime. The tartan ribbon fluttered still, its color stark against white, a small reminder of love's tenacious weave. Inside the refurbished great hall, Laird Overtoun hosted an opening gala for the new Heritage and Healing Center. Velvet-roped alcoves displayed photographs of the bridge through the decades, samples of sensor charts, a preserved page of Edith's diary, and a listening station where visitors could experience the silent minute that ended Rosalind's broadcast. The curator's note beside it read, "Please listen with kindness. What you hear is what is no longer there." Guests queued in respectful hush, some pressing palms to headphones the way penitent pilgrims touch relics. More than one emerged with unshed tears bright as stars. Dr. Morven Wallace guided tours, voice gentle, steering conversation toward empathy rather than spectacle. She led guests to a glass case housing Douglas Grieg's extinguished lantern wick, trimmed, chimney polished. Its placard quoted the caretaker, "Light is what we bring when darkness seems louder." Grieg himself, reluctant celebrity, served as grounds docent, pointing out where wildflowers would burst come spring and telling children how brave bracken once was. Their bright questions: did the ghost ever scare you? Were you lonely? Made him chuckle, reshaping memory into a story in which courage outweighed sorrow. Ethan lectured in the center's tiny auditorium, presenting revised data and acknowledging the mystery still pulsing between rows of digits. He concluded each talk with the same admission: "I do not know everything that happened on Overtoun Bridge, but I know community, compassion, and ritual changed the outcome. Let's keep studying how." Students flocked to him afterward with notebooks fizzing with hypotheses, proof that wonder breeds inquiry as surely as thunder breeds echo. Rosalind recorded a follow-up episode on site, microphone cradled against the murmuring fireplace in Edith's former library. She invited storytellers Wallace, Ethan, Grieg, the Laird, even Fergus's owners via video link to share how life had unfurled in the haunting's wake. The episode ended not with eerie static but with the rustle of the birch and the soft tinkle of wind chimes the Laird had hung nearby, a living bell song tuned to no tragedy. Spring arrived on the back of southern breezes, and with it came lambing. Cries, crocus spears pushing through thaw-loosened soil, and the first tour groups of the season. Dogs padded the walking paths, noses busy, tails scribbling pure punctuation. A local ordinance now required short leashes on the bridge, not from fear but as a courtesy to shared history. Owners complied gladly, often pausing mid-span to snap. Photos framed by railings newly lined with safety mesh so unobtrusive it seemed woven from morning light itself. One afternoon in late April, a class of primary school children visited the estate. Their teacher, Mrs. Kerr, asked them to draw how the bridge feels. Some sketched arches like dragon spines. Others drew hearts sprouting wings. A few copied the young birch, roots curling around something precious underground. When they gathered on the bridge for lunch, a breeze lifted sandwich wrappers, plastic ghosts in training, and the children chased them, laughter ricocheting like bright coins tossed into the air. Wallace watched from the parapet and realized laughter had replaced lullaby. The bridge was tuning itself to a higher key. That evening she returned alone, journal in hand. Dusk stacked gray-violet layers upon the hills while river water clear. Now after spring rains whispered against exposed stone. She stood at the fatal gap, not fatal anymore. She corrected herself, merely a space between balusters, and closed her eyes. In the hush she heard tiny footfalls, a fox perhaps, or merely her pulse. No spectral chorus rose. Instead she caught a faint scent of wood smoke from cottages farther down the glen, and beneath that new grass warming under the day's last heat, she wrote one line: "Here ends the echo. Here begins the ordinary miracle." Grieg continued evening walks, lantern retired, hands tucked in jacket pockets. Sometimes he found pawprints in damp clay, evidence of rambunctious pups exploring the bank. He smiled at each imprint, tipping an imaginary cap to invisible guardians he hoped now rested. On the anniversary of Bracken's leap, he placed a carved wooden collie figurine at the birch's base, dusted snow off its back, and whispered, "Run free." A blackbird sang overhead, accepting the words as dawn. Elsewhere, ripples spread. The veterinary scholarship launched, awarding its first grant to a student researching how certain frequencies affect canine stress levels. Tour operators adjusted marketing. Visit the Valley of Quiet Courage. Article after article cited Overtoun not as a place of suicide but as a case study in community-led healing. Choirs performed the ancient Gaelic lullaby in cathedrals, repurposing grief into lullabies for premature infants in hospital wards. Yet the bridge never forgot its own history. Stone remembers even when hearts move on. On misty mornings, when dew clung like tears to lichen, Wallace sometimes sensed a presence not mournful, just attentive, hovering at her shoulder. She imagined Edith watching the living cross safely, nodding each time a leash pulled taut away from danger. Farther below, the Clyde rifled silt and stone, carrying sediments of bygone sorrow out to sea where they might dissolve in salt and time. Near midsummer, the birch exploded in green fire, leaves tremoring under bees' applause. Its trunk, once slender as a cane, thickened, bark etching sigils of growth. Children designated it a wishing tree, tucking notes among branches, hopes for new puppies, healed grandparents, world peace in neon crayon. Grieg collected fallen wishes. After storms, pressing damp paper flat on his hearth to dry, then sliding them into a scrapbook titled Better Tomorrows. He considered it the safest archive any village could keep. On the first anniversary of the vigil, the valley held a festival. Stalls sold oat cakes and heather honey. Fiddlers reeled. Rescue charities paraded adoptable dogs. At sunset, everyone gathered on the bridge. Wallace spoke briefly, thanking those who listened when silence spoke loudest. Then the choir sang the lullaby once more, but faster now, in major key, voices lifting like skylarks. When the final note rang out, dogs barked in spontaneous harmony. And for the first time since anyone could remember, the sound drew only laughter, no shiver of dread. Night settled soft and star-steeped. Lanterns electric this time glowed along the rail, outlining a path like a promise. Onward, families drifted home, leaving the bridge to cricket drone and owl glide. Wallace lingered last, fingertips grazing cool stone. She thought of the diary page where Edith sketched a dog silhouette, captioned the watcher, and wondered if watchers, like seasons, could change roles. Perhaps now the living watched over the beyond rather than fearing its gaze. She turned toward the manor, where windows glowed warm. Behind her, arches framed moonlit water, but no shadow detached itself to follow. The bridge hummed only with the ordinary load of memory, not burden but ballast, keeping structure true against the push of time. Footsteps tapped wood on stone hers. Alone, and that was enough. If this story moved you, if the hush of Overtoun Bridge whispered something of hope into your own heart, share that hope. Subscribe and join our growing circle of listeners who believe courage can rewrite any echo. Click the bell so you never miss a tale where darkness yields to light, and leave a comment telling us how you guard the bridges in your life together. Let's keep watch with kindness, one story, one step, one quiet miracle at a time.